Hello again, it's Ronnie Bringle, and I'm glad you decided to join me on this Santa journey. We're about ready to give the Santa guy some eyes so that he can see where his reindeer are taking him. First of all, though, I would like to do just a little bit of more refining on the flesh so that that can be drying while I'm working on the eyes. So I'm going to pick up my light flesh and I'm going to do a dry stipple dry rub. So I'm going to come into this light area and just begin to blend that with the blush that I put on last time. When we put that red blush on, we don't want to work on it too soon because it will make the face very, very bright pink when you mix it with a lighter color. So even if you don't wait a whole week, at least make sure it's nice and dry with a hair dryer, or wait a couple of hours and work on something else. But that red should be nice and dry before you start mixing it with your light flesh. So I'm just stippling, I'm doing a little bit of dry rubbing just so that that extra bit of red that I put on will get blended in and look like a nice blush. Just a couple of times. Notice I'm not doing anything on the lip. He doesn't really need anything on his forehead at this point. I just wanted to get that red blended. Okay, and then we'll start doing the detail on the eyes. I'll zoom in on those eyes so that you can see them a little bit better. There we go. We've done the white part and we've done the blue irises and we've done some shading with Payne's Gray. So what I want to do now is to mix my soft black. Soft black can be 1 part black and 1 part burnt umber. It can also be 1 part black, 1 part Payne's Gray. So either one will work. Then I'm going to paint the pupils in, and if it's not a dark enough color to start with, that's okay with me, because I can always come back and enhance them, which is a lot easier than trying to come back and undo them. So I'm just looking at my photo. Actually, you'll be looking at your photo and I'm looking at the real painting to see how big those pupils are and where they are. Okay, now I want to use my soft black and outline the irises. In doing that, I can also make a couple of corrections. Right here, it appears to me that this part of the iris is not quite round enough. So I'm going to pull the edge of that iris in just a little bit, making it just a little more round with my outline. The outline is going to appear a little bit dark at this point, but that's because we don't have as much darkness in the eyes as we will eventually have. Okay. Now I'm going to use that same soft black color, and I'll switch over to my little number 4 spotter, or you could use a liner brush. I like this spotter really well for doing this type of tiny work. And I'm going to tuck some of that soft black up there, right up next to the eyelid. I want to create a nice shadow. The eyelid shadows the eye, so I want to create a nice shadow there on the eye to set that eye into the eye socket. Now, in looking at this, I can see that I probably need to do a little bit more shading even on the white part of the eye, right in here. That shading should come to the tear duct, the canthus, but it should not go across the canthus. We want to get quite a bit of shading in this right hand part of the eye. Now you notice that the shading on the blue part, on the iris, is pretty much about as dark as the pupil. We want to get a good amount of shading over in the far side of the left eye. That would be Santa's right eye. And we need to make sure it's shaded up next to the nose. If you get too much shading on at this point, you can always come back and do a little bit of highlighting, and that's pretty much exactly the way I do it. I like to get things a little bit overshaded and then come back and pull the light out. At this point, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put the sparkle in the eye just to see whether or not I have, just to see if I'm on the right track. That's going to be your dark white. You never want to put a bright white in the eye because it really makes them look too startled, kind of stark looking. So we're going to go with dark white. Has to be light enough to show. And it's not a round circle. In this case, it's just a kind of a little scuff mark. Okay, now with my liner brush, now that I have that part of the eye in, I'm going to go back and just see what I need to do to that canthus, the tear duct, to make it look a little bit better. I think what I'll do is I'll darken it all down with my burnt sienna. I can see that I need to bring a little bit of flesh up right here. My tear duct is kind of coming out over the top of the eyelid area. So I'm going to bring a little bit of flesh up in there. Alright, I feel like I've got my tear duct shaped a little bit better now. And now I'm going to use some, it's a little bit darker than brown earth or burnt sienna, but not as dark as burned umber. So I mix the two together. And what I want to do is a little outline around the edge of the canthus. Okay, now the last step on the eyes, and you might not do this yet, you might need to really still work a little bit on the detail, but I want to show you the steps, and then we can go back and refine if needed. I'm going to use my soft black, burnt umber plus black, equal parts, and I'm just going to dab, starting about right there, right where the in the center part of this part of the iris. And I'm just going to dab some little spiky things in there, just little tiny spiky things. We don't want to pull up big long eyelashes because that wouldn't be really very realistic. Once you get over to this part of the eye, then you can kind of make them a little tiny bit longer. Now there's still quite a bit of work to do on the flesh around the eye, but we'll come back to that. And anything that we do now can be enhanced or fixed or whatever. Now I got a little too much on there. I'll finish going all the way across and I'll come back and fix it. A little too much black. With a wet brush I'll just take a little bit of it out. Okay, there. Alright, now we're going to let those eyes dry, and while the eyes are drying I'm going to put a little bit of red on his suit so that we can start the beard. Well, I'm not quite ready for Hollywood yet, but I have discovered something about this filming. I did discover that if I put something else white or very light in the camera along with his face, that the camera has a chance to focus on something else besides just the light on the face. So from now on, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see this piece of white paper that I'm going to tape here. And that's the reason it's there, because I think you can get a little better focus on the face. The camera doesn't want to just intensify that the light part of the face. So there we go. So we're seeing Santa's eyes now, and I think his eyes look pretty good. I see a couple things I'll change, but that'll come a little bit later when we start really tweaking the eyes. But now I want to start on the beard and mustache a little bit, but before we can do that, we have to get some red under there. So I want to show you how to put that red on. I'm going to use a flat brush, excuse me, I'm going to use an oval Bringle blender. You can use an 8 or a 6, somewhere in that size. I'm going to be using the cadmium red light and alizarin crimson hue, which would relate to naphthol red light and burgundy. So I'll pick up my cadmium red, and I want to just put this, the first thing I want to do is to give myself my borders. So I'll just put some red out here to show the edge of his sleeve that's back here behind his tummy. I don't want to create hard lines under his beard, but I do want to create a hard line where his tummy comes out over his sleeve. So I'm just stretching this, tapping it, and then I'm going to blot my brush and pick up my dark red, which is the alizarin crimson hue or the burgundy. I'm going to set it right down and then just kind of pat it around. Now there's one thing about the reds, and it can work for good and for evil. They're very transparent, which the good part is that you can always use some of that dark background as your dark values. The bad part is you got to do a couple of coats. So I'm just not going to worry too much in this first application exactly how this looks. I'm just going to start getting color on, and it's going to be telling my brain what I'm going to do with it later on. Now this red comes up and in front of his arm, so I'm going to pull that right on up into there. But then I'm going to drag it and kind of dry brush it into the beard so that I don't have any hard line that I have to cover up with the beard. That's important. A lot of times I see people will make a hard line. They have that pattern for the beard, and then they want to paint the red all the way up to the edge of the beard, and then you end up with a beard that kind of looks more like something that got pasted on. You know, the pretend Santas that you see at the mall with their pasted on beards. Okay, we don't want that look. So all I'm doing is just I'm not whisking, I'm patting and tapping. I'm not using any water. My brush is obviously just a little damp from being washed, but I'm not adding any water to it, and I'm just kind of patting these reds together. It's amazing how these reds kind of just fall together. If you just pat them and tap them a little bit, they work really well together. And all you have to do is kind of look at your photo, put the dark where you see dark, put the light where you see light, and tap them together. If you're working with the Josonia acrylic, then you want to work a small area at a time so that you can work as much as possible wet into wet. And then move on, let it dry, and come back to it. I'm going to ignore the buttons. Those will be put back on later. His tummy is so big that it's putting a strain on his buttons. So we don't have a straight edge to the edge of his coat there. It's kind of wiggly where it's being pulled. I've got a good start on his coat now with this first layer of the 2 reds, and any finishing of that and refining it will come a little bit later. Right now we just needed to kind of get a start on it, and I didn't spend very much time on it. So now we'll get started on the beard and the mustache. Now I don't have any particular brush that I use all the time on every Santa. It depends on what kind of beard I want the Santa to have. In this particular instance, I wanted him to have kind of a short, almost frizzy kind of beard. So all of my strokes are going to be a little bit shorter and kind of wiggly. And at the time I decided I would use the flat blender. I have a flat blender that is kind of overused, so it's all fluffed out more or less. You could use a rake if you wanted to, but you have to be careful with the rake not to make all of your little hair strokes be uniform. So number 6, number 8, number 4 flat blender, that maybe you'll stipple it out on the palette and use that. Now when I start painting my beards, mustaches, things like that, I never approach it with the idea that this step is going to complete the look of the beard. Generally I tell my people you start with about 1/3 of the volume that you want to create, and only do it just little steps at a time, and never make it quite as close to the face or quite as long as you want it to be in the final outcome, so that you always have room for making corrections. So you can see with my little flat blender that's been kind of fluffed out on the tips, I'm kind of tapping and wiggling at the same time, so that I can create this almost a wiry kind of beard on him. And all I'm going to do is just kind of get started. I don't want to pull this down as long as I want it to be. I don't really want to go and do any of the little fuzzy hairs on the side of his face. Those will be done with a liner. So I'm looking at my sample and making sure that I don't go quite as far up on his face as I intend to do later on. Always leaving myself room to enhance and correct, because it's hard to do it exactly right the first time, and I rarely do. Always have to go back and fix and enhance, and so you've got to leave room for yourself to do that. I'm going to go ahead and pull a lot of hair underneath the ball and the wrapped gift over here. It'll be darkened and then finished up once we get the gifts done. Now for the mustache, you have to be especially careful not to do too much at one time. Mustaches are kind of finicky little things. Remember that the center of the mustache is right under the center of the nose. So all I'm going to do is tap a little bit of the mustache beginning. I'm not even close to thinking about making it look finished yet. I'm using my dark white, so we're not going to get much definition or any hair looking stuff just yet. I'll go ahead and start just a hint, just to kind of give him the look I want. I'm going to start the eyebrows. Now be careful about the eyebrows. Most people, myself included, tend to make the eyebrows a little bit high and a little bit too arched. That's what we see in the mirror every day, those arched eyebrows. But on a Santa, we don't want him to be looking too surprised. So we'll keep those eyebrows just a little more straight across. And we'll have just the beginning. And now I'm going to have to take this to the dryer. Before I can continue. The next step on the beard and mustache is to put in some shading. So I'm going to use an oval blender and black. I'm just going to work that paint into the brush, and then I'm going to be able to whisk it and kind of dry brush and dry rub it in place. So I'll start over here in a safe place where I know I want a considerable amount of dark, and I'm just whisking, dry brushing a lot of black into the shaded areas. And actually I'm going to be putting black in a good part of this whole mass, because in order to see light you have to have dark. So we're going to get a lot of dark in, especially if you can still see the edge of his chin underneath his beard, and you probably can. Then just make sure you get a lot of black in there and cover that up. I'll put just a little bit of black, just the beginnings of shading in his mustache. Make sure I get some on his beard under his mustache. The hair, beard, eyebrows, all those kinds of hairy things on the human form, I especially like to sneak up on those. I never like to just go in there full force and try to do it all in one or two times, because I like to get the feel of it. I like to be able to make corrections easily, and so I just go a little bit at a time, and I try not to hurry through these steps. On the eyebrows, we want to get some black shading on towards the nose, right in here. If you need to pick up a smaller brush, just feel free to do that. So I'm just kind of tapping and dabbing that in place. Eyebrows especially, I want to be able to make corrections as needed, because I never get those right the first time. Now we're going to let this black dry, and then we're going to do the white one, the dark white again. Alright, my black shading on my beard is dry, so I'm going to repeat what I did the first time, and this time maybe I'll grow it a little bit, but still I'm so much in the beginning stages that I'm not going to grow it too much. We need to get a lot more detail done, shading and lightening on the lips before we get too serious about the beard and mustache. But I think this step will give you kind of some direction, which way you're going to go with your Santa, how he's going to look, and once you get some of this hair in place, it gives you an idea, a little better idea about where you need to shade on the face, and especially those lips. So next time we'll get a little more detail done on the face, especially the lips, and then we'll continue on with the hair. And I think he's starting to look like a real Santa. Whatever a real Santa is. There are lots of different kinds of Santas, aren't there? So we can make him look pretty much however we want him to look. So this will be it for today's lesson, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for painting with me.